Hey everyone, hey, welcome. This is Axel. I'm Axel from Get Speaking English. Welcome if you're new, welcome back if you've been here before, and hello if you're watching this video after the fact. We're on Twitch right now. And we're going to be talking about the internet today. We're going to be talking about the internet today, and we're going to be looking at part 3 of the speaking paper of the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. So this lesson is a bit interactive. So if you have Twitch, if you have a Twitch account, you should be able to participate through the chat. So you can throw out your ideas. But what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a bit of a presentation together. We're going to look at some material together, talk about it, and just generate lots of great vocabulary phrases, really useful things for talking about this topic in the context of the speaking paper for the B2 first and the C1 advanced exam. Yeah, and I'm hoping it's not too noisy here today. It's very, very windy here. I don't know if you can hear it, but the house has been kind of rattling and it's very noisy here, but I'm hoping it's not going to be too distracting. But anyways, so as I mentioned, this lesson in particular, it's aimed for preparing students for the B2 first and the C1 advanced exams. However, a lot of this language, a lot of these words are going to be really useful for an IELTS exam, for example, a TOEFL exam, other general English exams, and just for anybody who's looking to speak English at an upper intermediate, an advanced level, even a proficient level. All of this language is super useful for talking about this topic. All right. And what we're going to do specifically today is we're going to first look at some vocabulary related to this. We're going to do a bit of a warm-up activity, and we're actually going to be specifically focusing on internet safety today, so how to stay safe online. And then we're going to move on. We're going to look at a part 3 task, something similar to what you might find on B2 first or C1 advanced, and we're going to look at that together, maybe brainstorm some model answers together or just some ideas for talking about the task. And then afterwards, as usual, I will go ahead, I will put all of our fantastic notes together, so we have that as a resource, and I will upload the video and everything on YouTube, so you will be able to reference that material after the fact. And you could also potentially use the material to practice discussing this topic as well. So, lots of great things. All right. So, usually as a warm-up activity, I sort of have something a bit prepared, but I thought that we could do something a little bit different today. As I said, we are going to talk about how to stay safe online, but what we're going to do actually is we're going to look at this article. So I found this article online. It's just a random article, but how to stay safe online. And we're just gonna look at this top part of this article together. It's a very long article. We're not gonna look at the entire thing together. But I thought what we could do is we could look at this website and we could look at just this sort of opening paragraph to this article, and let's just talk about some of these ideas that they've addressed and go through the points and sort of comment on them. So, and this is actually something that you could do as well if you're looking for ideas about how to develop your speaking, about how to improve your fluency, because a lot of people think that in order to improve their fluency and in order to get practice speaking, they have to do it with other people. So they have to have a conversation, and either have that conversation with a teacher, with a native speaker, or with other students, like friends. However, you don't actually have to talk with other people in order to get speaking practice. You really just have to speak. That's all you need to do, is you just have to speak. Nobody has to necessarily listen to you speak. So yes, it's valuable to have conversations because that's practicing your listening skills as well, your ability to converse. That's really important. That actually that's part of what's being assessed during this part of the exam. But when it comes to just developing fluency and just our speaking ability in general, getting that confidence, you don't have to speak with anybody. So that's why I share a lot of speaking prompts through social media. And here today, we're going to look at an article. And you could also look at an article, read it, and kind of respond to it as well. So anyways, so enough about that. So this here, as we mentioned, is talking about how to stay safe online. And what do they have here? So it's no secret that the internet is home to some shady characters. So talking about shady, we're just talking about characters that you can't really trust. It seems like they're maybe potentially bad people. Okay, but staying safe online doesn't require you to turn your internet off. Instead, stay mindful, so stay aware, and look at these 10 easy tips for internet safety. So we're going to read them, and we're just going to talk about them and see what kind of vocabulary comes up for talking about these ideas. So tip number 1 is don't share personal information, right? Obviously, your personal information is private. And when we talk about personal information, we're talking about, your address, your name, maybe social security numbers, your credit card information, right? All of that information that is used to identify you. And it's not only used to identify you, but also for setting up accounts in your name, right? So you shouldn't share your details, such as your full address, social security numbers, with anybody online. And so instead, potentially, maybe you could share, instead of sharing your address, you could just say generally where you lived, for example, right? So that's one thing you could potentially do. Or maybe you could use a pseudonym online or a nickname. So I think most of us know what a nickname is. It's kind of like an alternative name you might use instead of your real name that people would refer to you to. And a pseudonym is actually, it's like a fake name, a fictitious name that you would use instead of your pen name. And that might be something that, for example, a writer would use as well, people who want to post anonymously online. So if they don't want others to know who they are, they might use a pseudonym to do that. Yeah. So, so you could use a pseudonym, that sort of thing. And all of that personal information, cyber criminals can use that information to set up accounts, like I said, under your name, and commit various types of cybercrime, right? Cybercrime or credit card fraud. So, and of course, credit card fraud, that's going to be when maybe criminals, they'll go ahead, they'll set up cards or accounts under your name, and then they will spend lots and lots of money that you have to pay back later, right? You have to pay back money, or we would say to pay off a debt, actually. So you would be responsible for paying off that debt that you didn't accumulate yourself. Yeah. So let's talk about the second one. So double check and verify links. So what does that mean? So obviously to double check something means that you look at it twice to make sure the information is good. And to verify links means to make sure that it's legitimate. So, and something legitimate, that is, if something's legitimate, we know that it is real, we know that it is true. So it is really important for you to check those links, especially the ones you get in email, before clicking on them to make sure they are real. And so that's usually necessary if you get a link in an email, for example, particularly from a sender you don't know. But also, I get them in text messages, things like that. Also, sometimes, Telegram, WhatsApp. So it's always good to make sure the links are good, right? So to do that, basically what you need to do is, you're going to hover. You want to hover your cursor over top of the link, right? So hover it over and then check the information without clicking on it. So to hover, that means to put basically, I think you can see my cursor. The little cursor is the little pointer, the little finger on the screen. So for example, you can see here, I'm hovering over this link, don't share personal info, but I'm not clicking on it. So to hover over something means to move your cursor on top of something without clicking it. To hover also has another meaning as well, but similar meaning, but in the physical world, to hover means to sort of suspend in the air over top of something. So a helicopter could hover in the air without moving, right? Some insects can do that as well. They will just they'll be like fluttering, they'll just stay in the air, like hummingbirds or dragonflies. Those are animals that can hover in one place in the air for a moment. Yeah, so that's what it means to hover, right? Yeah, so cyber criminals often use these kinds of links in what we would call phishing emails. So, and a phishing emails, those are fake emails that are designed to trick you into doing something that you shouldn't, right? So they will often either lead to web pages that maybe will steal your personal information, or sometimes they might also prompt you to download what we would call malware. So they would prompt you maybe to download malware. And this is a malicious and evil or a dangerous software that is basically designed to maybe take over your computer, maybe steal your information, those sort of things, right? So they're gonna trick you into doing that. And I actually want you to notice for a second, so I'm saying, to trick someone into doing something. So I just want you to notice here that we would use into usually with with this verb, so that's the preposition. And just notice this verb form, right? So to trick someone into doing something, so the ing form, right? So in this, right, this just means to use basically deceptive or maybe misleading means to cause somebody to do something or convince somebody to do something they probably shouldn't do. Yeah, so if we're gonna trick people, and so hackers are going to try to trick us into giving up our information. Yeah, so it's really important for us to verify these links, this information, before giving away our personal information or our personal data to the wrong people. Yeah, all right. So let's talk about this third one now. So use secure public Wi-Fi, right? So obviously we're not at home all the time. We might go to a coffee shop or maybe to the mall or something, or a restaurant. If we're in those kind of public places, it's best to make sure that you connect to networks that require a password. And that's because a lot of public Wi-Fi networks, the ones that don't have passwords, are often insecure. And if they're insecure, that means that they are just they're easy for maybe hackers to get into. Your data is not hidden in any way. So those networks are insecure, they're not safe, they're not very well protected. Yeah, so it's easy for hackers to either track you maybe or steal your information or anything else that is transmitted over those networks. So, to transmit something, that's just basically another way to say to send something. And we often use the word transmit when we're talking about electronic signals, electronic information. So we would talk about transmitting data over a network. So this kind of data is really easy for hackers to get to see if you happen to be on an open public network that's not protected with a password. So it's a lot better to use something more secure, the opposite of insecure, so something more secure with a password that will help protect your data better. All right. So number 4, we have VPN. So use a VPN. So a VPN, that is a service that will encrypt your information. It will encrypt your data, but it will also hide your internet connection. It'll hide your IP address. Your IP address is a little code that basically identifies your location on the internet. So it hides that and it encrypts your information. And if we encrypt something, that means that we hide either the messages or the information by using a special code, and then that message can only be read if the user on the other end uses the correct type of program. So it's a lot more secure because those messages would be hidden from anybody on the outside. So yeah, so the VPN makes it a lot more difficult for hackers to intercept that information. So basically mean to like come in and take something. I can't spell. So yeah, so it makes it difficult for them to intercept and take that information or track your online activities. It could also make you anonymous online. And I think I mentioned the word anonymous earlier, but if you're anonymous, that means that other people cannot tell who you are. So you basically hide your identity. So this will track your IP address and just add an extra layer of security when you happen to be browsing online. Perfect. So let's talk about 5. So only log into sites that start with HTTPS. This HTTPS with the slashes. All right. And yeah, so what does that mean? So I don't think you can see it here on this browser. Oh, you can see it up here on the top. Oh, you can't see that. But it's like when the URL, when the address begins with this, and it has a little padlock symbol, and the little padlock symbol is kind of like that. And this just it ensures that your connection is secure and your information is encrypted. So again, it's using that code to hide it behind the code. And this means that your data that you share between your device and the website cannot be seen by any unauthorized parties. So if people are unauthorized, that means that they are not allowed to do something. So if we talk about an unauthorized user or an unauthorized party, we mean somebody who didn't have permission to do something. Yeah. So if you use websites without this, that means that your credentials could be stolen. And what do we mean by credentials? It's just basically a fancy catch-all word referring to your important information, so your passwords, your login information, all of your personal information. So so you could potentially share your credentials with these other people if you're not using a secure website. And your account could end up getting compromised or stolen. And we talk about a compromised account or compromised information. We just mean that information has been hacked and it has been sort of disrupted somehow by outside people who are unauthorized. So something like compromised has been hacked or sort of messed with. So it is not good. Yeah. All right. Number 6, be careful who you chat with, right? So obviously you want to avoid talking to strangers online, especially on social media platforms or chat rooms, and you shouldn't share your information, right? It's really common nowadays for cyber criminals to pretend that they're somebody they are not, to try to earn your trust. And that just means to get your trust. So we'd say to earn someone's trust just means to get someone's trust. And they eventually will try to trick you into sharing your personal information or clicking on bad links, right? So it's really important to be cautious. And to be cautious means that you're very aware and you try to be very careful because you want to avoid taking risks. Yeah, so we have to be very cautious when we are dealing with new people we meet online. We need to make sure that they are not just bad people trying to earn our trust to get our information. So we need to be careful about that. All right. So number 7, we're going to turn off the Bluetooth. So what is the Bluetooth? So the Bluetooth is a system kind of similar to Wi-Fi, and it lets electronic equipment communicate and connect to one another. So if you happen to leave your Bluetooth enabled, so if you leave it enabled or turned on, hackers can essentially use that to get into your devices, potentially track you. So it's really important to make sure we don't leave our Bluetooth enabled when we're not using it. It's always better to turn it off so we can protect our devices. And number 8, so use antivirus software. So this software, really important. It protects against malware. So we talked about malware earlier. Those programs that try to steal your information or maybe take over your machines. Also protects against viruses, so other bad programs or other online threats, right? So this software will scan your system or your devices just and identify threats and then remove them and just clean up your system a bit. So to scan something, it means to look over something or to look through something kind of quickly. So, and in this case, we're talking about looking through the computer. So looking through all of your information. So it will scan everything really quickly that you have on your computer and identify if there's anything problematic. So it'll scan it and do that. All right. 2 more. So use secure passwords. So what does it mean to use secure passwords? Well, instead of easy passwords like password 123, a secure password, that would be a strong password. And typically a strong password is made of a combination of letters, numbers, and special characters. So special characters, those are kind of the weird characters that you might not normally use while you're typing, but things like maybe foreign letter like accents and things, currencies, or just other sort of different characters that we wouldn't normally use for typing. Yeah, so all of those special characters, we would want to use those in combination to make a really strong password. And then, because it can be really hard to keep track of all that information, what we could do is use a password manager. And a password manager is just basically a database where you would hold all of that information. So that's really important to do because a weak password, so a password that's easy to guess, is going to be really easy for hackers to crack. So we talk about cracking a password. So to crack a password just means to guess a password, to figure it out. So we want to make sure that our passwords are not easy to crack. We want to make sure that they are strong passwords, not weak passwords. So making sure they have lots of special characters and numbers and combinations in them. So those are really good. And then storing everything in our password manager. All right. And last but not least, back up your data. So it's really important to regularly back up your data and your important files on an external drive, or a cloud drive. So I'm just going to show you for a quick second. So an external drive, it's like one of these things. Here, I got a picture. One of these things. So it's a hard drive that's outside of your computer or outside of your device. So you can see this one here. It's just got this little thing that you plug into the computer. So that is an external drive. Or you could also use cloud storage or a cloud storage service like Google Drive, for example, OneCloud, like there's a bunch of them. And all of that you could back up your information on, so you have a second copy of everything, and that's really good to prevent data loss, right? So there we go. So cloud storage is just a service that basically stores all of your information, but on the internet. So it's not on your physical device, but it's on the internet. And that's really important because data loss would you lose your information. So data loss can occur for a variety of different reasons, right? For example, you could maybe have a hardware failure, right? Maybe a malware attack. So again, maybe one of those bad programs gets on your computer and then you lose your information that way. Or maybe you just delete files by yourself. I'm sure I've done it. I have definitely done it. So if you have a backup, you'll have a copy of that information, and you'll be all prepared in case anything happens to get missing or stolen. Yeah. So lots of things that we can say about this information, right? So I've just gone through, I've talked about each of these individual points, and I've just spent a good 20 minutes talking by myself. So this is absolutely something that you can do as well if you're looking for an alternative way to practice your speaking or gain your fluency and just, get confident while speaking, right? Because it just takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of repetition, and we can do that through lots of activities where we are talking to ourselves. So another thing that you could do as well is you could read a portion of the article. So for example, if we keep going, maybe you could read a paragraph, for example, and then you could summarize this paragraph. So that could be another activity that you could do as well. So, you could do paragraph by paragraph or section by section, and then once you get to the end of that paragraph, you would just take a moment to summarize what you read. So a summary is just going to be basically the highlights, the key points of what you read. Another thing that you can do is you could go sentence by sentence, and you could do a paraphrase. And a paraphrase is when you say the exact same information, but using different words. So that's another really important skill to be able to do in English, so both when speaking and writing. So that's another activity that you could do. So you could paraphrase, you could do summary. You could also just react to the information as well. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? What would you add on to? Is there anything that you would take away? So you could use those ideas or a combination of some of those ideas just to get talking about the information. Maybe there's some interesting words in here that you thought you would like to add to your vocabulary. So that'll give you kind of an opportunity to practice those words, right? So lots of great things that we could do while we're reading, while we're by ourselves, to practice our speaking. All right. So I'm going to go back to the actual task now. So now that we have a lot of fantastic language, we are going to look at, I lost it. There we go. We're going to be looking at this task today. So if you're not sure about part 3 of the B2 First and the C1 Advanced exam, it's done with another candidate. So either one candidate, usually one, but sometimes there are 2. So sometimes there are 3 people total in the group, but usually this activity is done with 2 people. And what happens is they give you a piece of paper with some information on it. And you can see here, so there's a bit of information here in the center. There's a question, and then we have a couple points around that piece of information. So the idea is that you're going to have a conversation about this piece of information with your partner, and you have 2 minutes to have this conversation. And then after that conversation, the examiner will ask a follow-up question as well. So you have another minute to continue the conversation about this topic. So you get the task. You have about 15 seconds to look at the information before speaking. So that's not a lot of time, but just enough time just to read the points and sort of think really quickly what you're going to talk about. A couple tips for this task. So they don't like it when people repeat one another. You have to contribute original ideas. So don't repeat what your partner says. You always want to be adding onto the conversation, not just repeating. I mean, sure, you could clarify what they said. That's fine. But always be building. We always want to be building when it comes to doing this conversation. We don't want to just be repeating the same things over and over again. Also, keep your contributions short. So sometimes students will have a lot of things to say, but it's not a monologue. We have to be able to show that we can participate in a conversation with another person. So that requires, maybe asking questions, pausing, listening, contributing that way. So we can't just, you can't just spend the entire time talking. If you do get a partner that spends a ton of time talking, you can interrupt them. So that is a skill worth learning as well, how to interrupt people and have get in there, have an opportunity to just say what you want to say. So we can do that. But yeah, the idea is to have a good conversation, right? So kind of a balanced conversation and being able to do that. So yeah, so you can ask your partner to, you can agree with them, you can disagree with them, you can ask if they agree, you could say that you could ask them questions. I mean, you just have to sort of continue the conversation, right? Another thing as well, because sometimes they'll get this task and they see all the information and they think they just need to rush around and touch on every single one of these topics. You do not have to do that. So you don't have to talk about every single topic. You have to talk about the main topic, yes, and you have to address, a couple of these points, but you do not have to talk about every single one of these points. Also, you could maybe spend the entire time kind of talking about just one or two points, right? But so as long as the conversation is evolving, as long as you're adding new things into it, you can do it that way. You just avoid being repetitive, right? And always add new things, but you do not have to go around and talk about every single one of these things. So, and just the goal is to have a really good conversation. So that's all we're looking for. We're just looking to have a good conversation about this information, and that's it. It's just like what you would do if you were talking with a friend or something like that. So don't worry about it too much. It'll be fine. Yeah, so this is what we're going to talk about for this one. We are talking about cybersecurity. So the question is, how can these things how can these things help a business improve its cyber security? So we have a couple things here. So we have firewalls, multi-factor authentication, antivirus software, encryption tools, and employee training. Yeah, so a couple different ideas. So if you have a couple ideas about any of these, feel free to throw them out into the chat. We've learned a lot of great vocabulary today, so feel free to maybe try to use some of the vocabulary we learned earlier as well. But yeah, let's think about these points. So how can these things help a business improve its cybersecurity? Well, I'm going to talk about firewalls first. Let's talk about firewalls. So, the firewall acts as a barrier, right? It acts as a barrier between a computer and its network, right? And what is a barrier? What do I mean by that? It's like it blocks it. It's kind of like a wall, right? Where you have the computer and then you have the outside world, right? Yeah. So it basically protects the computer and its, the trusted network. So maybe like the local network, the home network, and anything outside the untrusted external ones. So we have internal, maybe within the office or maybe within the home, and then external, that's going to be the outside. That's what we mean. So it's really great because you can monitor and control incoming traffic. So to monitor basically means to watch and, check what's happening, right? So it's going to monitor that traffic that's coming from outside, and it'll ensure that no unauthorized users gain access to our network, right? So again, somebody unauthorized is somebody that doesn't have permission to do something. So we want to block all of that, right? Yeah, and firewalls are just really good for protecting sensitive data, right? So sensitive data, something sensitive, again, that's just like kind of a fancy word for, it just means private, basically. So any sensitive documents, sensitive information, maybe a sensitive conversation, those are private conversations that only, that not everybody can know about, right? So the information needs to be kept a secret. It needs to be kept private. Yeah, so firewalls are really good at protecting that sensitive data and any of your internal files, since they'll be able to alert employees of potential attacks, right? And then the employees, the business would be able to react accordingly, right? React to the information. Firewalls are also great because it would make it harder for a hacker to gain access to a business's files and information. So that's obviously a plus, right? It's just in general, right? Businesses have a lot of sensitive information about their employees and their customers. So all of that would keep that information secure and safe from prying eyes, right? So firewalls would definitely be something that a business would want to have on their system, right? Especially if you're dealing with a lot of people and have lots of customers and things like that. So lots of private information. Let's talk about the antivirus software. So the antivirus software. Well, I would definitely say that, an antivirus, it's a must for any business. And I mean, like, it's needed, right? Like, you have to have it. So it is definitely a must for any business, as they detect and they remove malicious software and malware from computer systems. So what does it mean to detect something? To detect something means that you're like alerted or notified of something. So they'll, we said earlier, they scan the system, right? They detect files that could be problematic or harmful, and then they will remove that malicious software, that bad software and malware from the systems. So that's going to be really important for a business. They could also prevent hackers from installing what we would call ransomware on our computers. So we talked about malware, right? We talked about malware, but ransomware is kind of a specific type of malware that sometimes gets put on a computer. And what that does is that it basically locks the computer, it locks the data, and hackers then force the user to pay money to get their data back. So ransomware is when hackers put a program on a computer which prevents the owner from being able to use that computer or use that information until they pay a large sum of money. And ransomware has been, it's becoming more and more common, right? So that's a specific type of ransomware that businesses might need to be aware of. An antivirus can definitely spot various types of ransomware, right? And just, in general, if you don't have antivirus, so without an antivirus, businesses just, they're just going to be susceptible to these kinds of attacks. And if you're susceptible to something, it means that you're vulnerable, or you're open to an attack, like you're prone to having that specific thing happen to you. So if a business is susceptible to an attack, that means that they're open, it could happen to them. So it's much better to use an antivirus software and protect yourself, protect the business, protect that information, right? Yeah. And lastly, I'm going to talk about employee training, because this is kind of important too, right? Especially so because, employees are often the ones that are dealing with emails with strangers. They are the face of an organization, or they are like the frontline workers, right? Those are the first people that have to deal with customers, that deal with emails, that deal with inquiries, right? So it's really important for employees to get training to know how to deal with all this new information, right? So it's really important for them to identify phishing scams. So again, we talked about phishing scams earlier, those emails or those text messages with malicious links. So it's important that they know how to identify phishing emails and to know how to deal with them, right? So that's something really important, right? And it's also really important just for employees to know that it's important that they don't give out important private details to the wrong parties, right? So maybe those strangers we mentioned earlier, maybe those strangers are pretending to be trustworthy people. Maybe they're trying to earn the trust of an employee to trick them into giving that sensitive information. So it's important to train our employees to make sure that they're not going to do that sort of thing, right? So that's definitely a thing, right? Scammers could potentially pretend to be legitimate customers, so they could pretend to be real customers or service providers and steal information that way. So employees definitely need to be aware of the risks, right? So they need to know about those risks. So, all in all, education is definitely key to being sure employees know how to safely use a computer and handle sensitive data. So handle that private data again, right? And they also need to know how to react when something has been compromised. So when something has been hacked, right? You would need to maybe report it to the appropriate authorities. So if we talk about the appropriate authorities, maybe to the police, maybe to the FBI, or just maybe to the security leaders within the company. So the people that would be able to take care of the problem and protect the company, the organization against those attacks, right? So there's lots that we could talk about when we're talking about this sort of topic, And like I said, we learned a lot of vocabulary in the past, right? I'm sure that we learned a lot about vocabulary in the warm-up activity. So lots of things that we could discuss here. So feel free to use this exercise in the review documents as a jumping off point for talking about this as well, right? You can do it with a friend if you want to, but you could also do it by yourself. Like we said earlier, you don't necessarily have to speak with anybody to get speaking practice in. You just have to do it, right? So you'll have that as a reference. You'll have all of these notes and talking points as well that you can check it all out and kind of practice your speaking that way. All right, so that is it for me today. I hope that this was a bit helpful. I'm gonna link this article as well. I'll link the article that I looked at the beginning so you could read it as well. There's probably gonna be lots of great vocabulary and phrases in there as well. And give it a go. See what you can learn from it. And if you want even more opportunities to learn, I also have a lot of things going on in social media. So I have Telegram groups for the B2, B1, B2 level learners, B2, C1 level learners. And then I also have speaking prompts that I share in the general channels. So there's lots of that going on. On Facebook, I kind of share everything from Instagram there. And we have lots of things going on Telegram. So feel free to check me out there if you're looking for more information. Next week, I'm going to be checking out part 4. And this is going to be my last sort of lesson in this series about the internet. So this is going to be the final one. So feel free to come back here on Twitch at the same time next week to check out that. And the topic after that is going to be relationships. So something completely new. And we're going to see the time is going to be a little bit different for those ones. But yeah, so one more lesson about the internet, and then we're going to talk about relationships for a bit, for something different. Okay, perfect. And that's it. I think that's everything for now. Feel free to get in touch if you have any comments or anything, or leave comments below as well. You could also put out some of your ideas maybe about that task as well, if there's anything that you want to add. And yeah, I will see you all next week. All right. Bye-bye.